Chapter 18. The next thing the Stirlings heard was that Valancy had been seen with Barney Snaith in a movie theater in Port Lawrence, and after it at supper in a Chinese restaurant there. This was quite true, and no one was more surprised at it than Valancy herself. Barney had come along in Lady Jane one dim twilight and told Valancy unceremoniously if she wanted a drive to hop in. "I'm going to the port. Will you go there with me?" His eyes were teasing, and there was a bit of defiance in his voice. Valancy, who did not conceal from herself that she would have gone anywhere with him to any place, hopped in without more ado. They tore into and through Deerwood. Mrs. Frederick and Cousin Stickles, taking a little air on the veranda, saw them whirl by in a cloud of dust and sought comfort in each other's eyes. Valancy, who in some dim pre-existence had been afraid of a car, was hatless and her hair was blowing wildly round her face. She would certainly come down with bronchitis and die at Roaring Abel's. She wore a low-necked dress and her arms were bare. That Snaith creature was in his shirt sleeves, smoking a pipe. They were going at the rate of 40 miles an hour, 60, Cousin Stickles averred. Lady Jane could hit the pike when she wanted to. Valancy waved her hand gaily to her relatives. As for Mrs. Frederick, she was wishing she knew how to go into hysterics. Was it for this, she demanded in hollow tones, that I suffered the pangs of motherhood? "I will not believe," said Cousin Stickles solemnly, "that our prayers will not yet be answered." Who will protect that unfortunate girl when I am gone?" moaned Mrs. Frederick. As for Valancy, she was wondering if it could really be only a few weeks since she had sat there with them on that veranda. Hating the rubber plant. Pestered with teasing questions like black flies. Always thinking of appearances. Cowed because of Aunt Wellington's teaspoons and Uncle Benjamin's money. Poverty-stricken. Afraid of everybody. Envying Olive. A slave to moth-eaten traditions. Nothing to hope for or expect. And now every day was a gay adventure. Lady Jane flew over the 15 miles between Deerwood and the port, through the port. The way Barney went past traffic policemen was not holy. The lights were beginning to twinkle out like stars in the clear, lemon-hued twilight air. This was the only time Valancy ever really liked the town, and she was crazy with the delight of speeding. Was it possible she had ever been afraid of a car? She was perfectly happy, riding beside Barney. Not that she deluded herself into thinking it had any significance. She knew quite well that Barney had asked her to go on the impulse of the moment, an impulse born of a feeling of pity for her and her starved little dreams. She was looking tired after a wakeful night with a heart attack, followed by a busy day. She had so little fun. He'd give her an outing for once. Besides, Abel was in the kitchen, at the point of drunkenness where he was declaring he did not believe in God and beginning to sing ribald songs. It was just as well she should be out of the way for a while. Barney knew Roaring Abel's repertoire. They went to the movie. Valancy had never been to a movie. And then, finding a nice hunger upon them, they went and had fried chicken unbelievably delicious in the Chinese restaurant. After which they rattled home again, leaving a devastating trail of scandal behind them. Mrs. Frederick gave up going to church altogether. She could not endure her friends' pitying glances and questions. But Cousin Stickles went every Sunday. She said they had been given a cross to bear. On one of Sissy's wakeful nights, she told Valancy her poor little story. They were sitting by the open window. Sissy could not get her breath lying down that night. An inglorious gibbous moon was hanging over the wooded hills, and in its spectral light Sissy looked frail and lovely and incredibly young. A child. It did not seem possible that she could have lived through all the passion and pain and shame of her story. He was stopping at the hotel across the lake. He used to come over in his canoe at night. We met in the pines down the shore. He was a young college student. His father was a rich man in Toronto. Oh, Valancy, I didn't mean to be bad, I didn't indeed. But I loved him so, I love him yet, I'll always love him. And I didn't know some things. I didn't understand. Then his father came and took him away. And after a little, I found out, oh, Valancy, I was so frightened. I didn't know what to do. I wrote him, and he came. He said he would marry me, Valancy. And why? Oh, Valancy, he didn't love me anymore. I saw that at a glance. He was just offering to marry me because he thought he ought to, because he was sorry for me. He wasn't bad, but he was so young, and what was I that he should keep on loving me? Never mind making excuses for him, said Valancy a bit shortly. So you wouldn't marry him? I couldn't. Not when he didn't love me anymore. Somehow, I can't explain. It seemed a worse thing to do than the other. He argued a little, but he went away. Do you think I did right, Valancy? Yes, I do. You did right. But don't blame him, dear. Please don't. Let's not talk about him at all. There's no need. I wanted to tell you how it was. I didn't want you to think me bad. I never did think so. Yes, I felt that whenever you came. Oh, Valancy, what you've been to me. I can never tell you, but God will bless you for it. I know he will. With what measure you meet. Sissy sobbed for a few minutes in Valancy's arms. Then she wiped her eyes. Well, that's almost all. I came home. I wasn't really so very unhappy. I suppose I should have been, but I wasn't. Father wasn't hard on me. And my baby was so sweet while he lived. I was even happy I loved him so much, the dear little thing. He was so sweet, Valancy, with such lovely blue eyes and little rings of pale gold hair like silk floss and tiny dimpled hands. I used to bite his satin-smooth little face all over softly, so as not to hurt him, you know. I know, said Valancy, wincing. I know, a woman always knows and dreams. And he was all mine. Nobody else had any claim on him. When he died, oh, Valancy, I thought I must die too. I didn't see how anybody could endure such anguish and live. To see his dear little eyes and know he would never open them again. To miss his warm little body nestled against mine at night and think of him sleeping alone and cold, his wee face under the hard frozen earth. It was so awful for the first year. After that it was a little easier. One didn't keep thinking this day last year. But I was so glad when I found out I was dying. Who could endure life if it were not for the hope of death? Murmured Valancy softly. It was of course a quotation from some book of John Foster's. I'm glad I've told you all about it, sighed Sissy. I wanted you to know. Sissy died a few nights after that. Roaring Abel was away. When Valancy saw the change that had come over Sissy's face, she wanted to telephone for the doctor. But Sissy wouldn't let her. Valancy, why should you? He can do nothing for me. I've known for several days that this was near. Let me die in peace, dear, just holding your hand. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Tell Father goodbye for me. He's always been as good to me as he knew how, and Barney. Somehow, I think that Barney. But a spasm of coughing interrupted and exhausted her. She fell asleep when it was over, still holding to Valancy's hand. Valancy sat there in the silence. She was not frightened or even sorry. At sunrise, Sissy died. She opened her eyes and looked past Valancy at something that made her smile suddenly and happily. And smiling, she died. Valancy crossed Sissy's hands on her breast and went to the open window. In the eastern sky, amid the fires of sunrise, an old moon was hanging as slender and lovely as a new moon. Valancy had never seen an old moon before. She watched it pale and fade until it paled and faded out of sight in the living rose of day. A little pool in the barrens shone in the sunrise like a great golden lily. But the world suddenly seemed a colder place to Valancy. Again, nobody needed her. She was not in the least sorry Cecilia was dead. She was only sorry for all her suffering in life. But nobody could ever hurt her again. Valancy had always thought death dreadful. But Sissy had died so quietly, so pleasantly. And at the very last, something had made up to her for everything. She was lying there now in her white sleep, looking like a child. Beautiful. All the lines of shame and pain gone. Roaring Abel drove in, justifying his name. Valancy went down and told him. The shock sobered him at once. He slumped down on the seat of his buggy, his great head hanging. Sissy dead, he said vacantly. I didn't think it would come so soon. Dead. She used to run down the lane to meet me with a little white rose stuck in her hair. Sissy used to be a pretty little girl. And a good little girl. "She has always been a good little girl," said Valancy. Valancy herself made Sissy ready for burial. No hands but hers should touch that pitiful, wasted little body. The old house was spotless on the day of the funeral. Barney Snaith was not there. He had done all he could to help Valancy before it. He had shrouded the pale Cecilia in white roses from the garden, and then had gone back to his island. But everybody else was there. All Deerwood and Upback came. They forgave Sissy splendidly at last. Mr. Bradley gave a very beautiful funeral address. Valancy had wanted her old Free Methodist man, but Roaring Abel was obdurate. He was a Presbyterian, and no one but a Presbyterian minister should bury his daughter. Mr. Bradley was very tactful. He avoided all dubious points, and it was plain to be seen he hoped for the best. 6 reputable citizens of Deerwood bore Cecilia Gay to her grave in decorous Deerwood Cemetery. Among them was Uncle Wellington. The Stirlings all came to the funeral, men and women. They had had a family conclave over it. Surely now that Sissy Gay was dead, Valancy would come home. She simply could not stay there with Roaring Abel. That being the case, the wisest course, decreed Uncle James, was to attend the funeral, legitimize the whole thing, so to speak. Show Deerwood that Valancy had really done a most creditable deed in going to nurse poor Cecilia Gay, and that her family backed her up in it. Death, the miracle worker, suddenly made the thing quite respectable. If Valancy would return to home and decency while public opinion was under its influence, all might yet be well. Society was suddenly forgetting all Cecilia's wicked doings and remembering what a pretty, modest little thing she had been, and motherless, motherless. It was the psychological moment, said Uncle James. So the Stirlings went to the funeral. Even Cousin Gladys Neuritis allowed her to come. Cousin Stickles was there, her bonnet dripping all over her face, crying as woefully as if Sissy had been her nearest and dearest. Funerals always brought Cousin Stickles' own sad bereavement back. And Uncle Wellington was a pallbearer. Valancy, pale, subdued-looking, her slanted eyes smudged with purple, in her snuff-brown dress, moving quietly about, finding seats for people, consulting in undertones with minister and undertaker, marshalling the mourners into the parlor, was so decorous and proper and Stirlingish that her family took heart of grace. This could not be, the girl who had sat all night in the woods with Barney Snaith, who had gone tearing bareheaded through Deerwood and Port Lawrence. This was the Valancy they knew. Really, surprisingly capable and efficient. Perhaps she had always been kept down a bit too much. Amelia really was rather strict, hadn't had a chance to show what was in her. So thought the Stirlings. And Edward Beck, from the Port Road, a widower with a large family who was beginning to take notice, took notice of Valancy and thought she might make a mighty fine second wife. No beauty, but a 50-year-old widower, Mr. Beck told himself very reasonably, couldn't expect everything. Altogether, it seemed that Valancy's matrimonial chances were never so bright as they were at Cecilia Gay's funeral. What the Stirlings and Edward Beck would have thought had they known the back of Valancy's mind must be left to the imagination. Valancy was hating the funeral, hating the people who came to stare with curiosity at Cecilia's marble-white face, hating the smugness, hating the dragging, melancholy singing, hating Mr. Bradley's cautious platitudes. If she could have had her absurd way, there would have been no funeral at all. She would have covered Sissy over with flowers, shut her away from prying eyes, and buried her beside her nameless little baby in the grassy burying ground under the pines of the Upback Church, with a bit of kindly prayer from the old Free Methodist minister. She remembered Sissy saying once, "I wish I could be buried deep in the heart of the woods where nobody would ever come to say, 'Sissy Gay is buried here,' and tell over my miserable story." But this, however, it would soon be over. Valancy knew, if the Stirlings and Edward Beck didn't, exactly what she intended to do then. She had lain awake all the preceding night thinking about it and finally deciding on it. When the funeral procession had left the house, Mrs. Frederick sought out Valancy in the kitchen. "My child," she said tremulously, "you'll come home now?" Home, said Valancy absently. She was getting on an apron and calculating how much tea she must put to steep for supper. There would be several guests from up back, distant relatives of the gays who had not remembered them for years. And she was so tired she wished she could borrow a pair of legs from the cat. Home, said Valancy absently. She was getting on an apron and calculating how much tea she must put to steep for supper. There would be several guests from up back, distant relatives of the gays who had not remembered them for years. And she was so tired she wished she could borrow a pair of legs from the cat. Yes, home, said Mrs. Frederick, with a touch of asperity. I suppose you won't dream of staying here now alone with Roaring Abel. Oh no, I'm not going to stay here, said Valancy. Of course, I'll have to stay for a day or two to put the house in order generally. But that will be all. Excuse me, Mother, won't you? I've a frightful lot to do. All those up back people will be here to supper. Mrs. Frederick retreated in considerable relief, and the Stirlings went home with lighter hearts. We will just treat her as if nothing had happened when she comes back, decreed Uncle Benjamin. That will be the best plan. Just as if nothing had happened.